Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As always, I do like to remind you, if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. So I am assuming that by this point, you have already seen the title and the description for this episode, so you kind of already have an idea where we're going with this one. But as per usual, when I do episodes like this, just a warning, a little disclaimer. Probably not one that you want to listen to with your children in the car, but the idea behind this episode is I found this piece on Feminist Current, and just to kind of back up and kind of give you guys an idea of where I'm at right now, I'm trying to figure out some things right now, and I'm in the midst of trying to take some thoughts I have and put them into words to then put into a microphone. But mainly I've been thinking a lot about feminism lately, and I've been going about the internet trying to find for lack of a better word, like rational feminist content. And it seems to be in very short supply, and I even tweeted out just to see if it was like a blind spot for me or if there was like some sites that I didn't know about, and nobody really had any suggestions for me, so that is a problem and an issue in and of itself that is going to possibly be part of the bigger thought piece that will happen sometime in the future. But anyway, I ran across this piece on Feminist Current, and just to kind of preface this, like, this isn't me picking like the most wildest esoteric piece I could from the site to try to make this episode to go in on them to try to make a point. Like, this is actually, per their homepage, one of the most popular pieces on the site right now. And it was written back in September of last year. So from September of 2018, we are now in February of 2019. It is still one of the most popular pieces. You can find it on the homepage in the little, you know how there's always like that little section of like popular pieces that sites have now, like kind of off to the side, like here's our popular stuff, you should go look at this. But anyway, getting into the piece, because over and beyond like the kind of ridiculousness of this whole piece, as far as the scenario that they're laying out, there's something here about the current feminist attitude towards men that is really, really disturbing. And to be sure, Feminist Current is more of a radfem site, and they are SWERFs, which are sex worker exclusionary radical feminists, which means they do not support sex work at all. They do not support prostitutes. They don't support porn. They're very anti-porn. And so this goes with that particular line of thinking, which seems to be something of a prevalent line of thinking, even in kind of less radical strains of feminist thought lately, which I personally don't agree with. I feel like if you are going to say you're a feminist, then you need to support a woman's right to choose whatever it is she wants to do with her body, including selling it. Like, if you are willingly, consensually being a sex worker, no matter what kind of sex work you're doing, you're an actual prostitute, you're a stripper, you're a porn star, you do cam work, you pose for nudes, you're a dominatrix, you do whatever it is you do, as long as you're freely doing it of your own free will, like, that should be the end of the conversation. But for a lot of feminists now, it's not, and that's because of this very weird, like, oppressor-oppressed paradigm that, again, is something that I'm still trying to work out a little bit, not to, like, understand it, but to kind of figure out how exactly they're applying this to, like, their normal, regular lives, because it seems to me like when you're looking at sexual relationships through that paradigm and viewing men as oppressors and you as oppressed, it's leading to some very, very fucked up places. And this piece goes some very fucked up places. So let's go ahead and get into the piece. The title of the piece is Sex Dolls Show Us What Men Want from Real Women. We Should Pay Attention. Subtitle: No matter how you package, pretty it up, or slough it off as harmless, The inanimate object that is a sex doll is merely a reflection of what men feel like they're entitled to do to women. Okay, so you can kind of already tell where we're going to go with this, and you're already we're not even into the piece per se, we're into the subtitle, and you're already talking about what men feel like they're entitled to, which I am going to expound upon that point a little later on in this piece, because there's a place in here where I feel like the point could be better made. But let's go ahead and get into the first paragraph of the piece. And mind you, this was from September of last year, so this first paragraph is a little dated. News broke last week that a sex doll brothel was opening in Toronto. While bylaw issues stalled Aura Dolls from opening in its proposed location, the setback is likely temporary. Silicone sex dolls are the most recent product to enter the market for men to fulfill their porn-fueled fantasies. Advertised by Aura Dolls, each hole features different yet unique textures, ridges, and tightness to give you intense sensations that are impossible to achieve even through real penetration. Alright, I want to stop at this first paragraph right here, because this is another theme that is laced throughout this piece and also through what seems to be the dominant strain of thought that feminists have towards men at this point, and that is this idea of porn-fueled fantasies. I mean, I'm not an idiot. I know we all watch porn. You may have fantasies that revolve around porn, but it's this idea that, and again, these are very anti-porn feminists. So you're automatically using any fantasy that a man might have. When you lump it in like this and you feel that way, you're automatically saying that it's all negative. Like, there cannot be any kind of positive feelings that a man could have towards a woman during a sexual fantasy. Like, you couldn't just fantasize about having, like, just normal consensual sex with a woman. Like, it all has to be this weird coercive thing. And again, I know I keep saying this, but we're going to come back to that idea a little later, because it's said pretty explicitly in this piece in ways that I'm just like, what the actual fuck do you think men think? But back to the piece. How lovely is that? Another dehumanizing step for women who are already considered merely receptacles to fulfill every man's desire and fantasies. No doubt they will soon be programmed to say, yes, sir, make coffee, and sweep the floor. Okay, this idea that men view women as solely, like, walking meat sacks with various holes. Like, I don't know what dudes these women are hanging out with, but all of the dudes that I've met in my life have been able to conceive of women as whole humans, not just as, like, sex objects, basically. And I wonder about this particular line of thinking, because it's something that keeps coming up to the point where it's almost pathological. Like, who exactly are you trying to convince? Like, is this really, like, it almost feels like projection in a way. Like, is this you projecting how you feel about yourself and about women onto other men? Like, it's this weird refrain that they keep coming back to, and it's like I said, it's creepy as fuck. But anyway, moving on. Let's be clear. There is nothing harmless about sex dolls. They represent the ultimate debasement of women. They represent yet another level of society's detachment from its responsibility to value, respect, and protect women. Sex dolls are a manifestation of porn culture, and the male-dominant society's belief that it needs to do whatever it can to make sure men can have sex when and however they want, no matter at what cost. Okay, first kind of idea I want to tackle from this paragraph is that this idea that it's society's responsibility to value, respect, and protect women. Now, I know I've talked about horseshoe theory here before. If you are not familiar, little brief aside here. Horseshoe theory is the idea that instead of people being on, like, a linear line where there's, like, a left and a right and a center, it's really more shaped like a horseshoe, where the extremes are not only much closer to each other than they ever care to admit, but they're much further away from the center than they ever care to admit. And this idea that it's society's responsibility to value, respect, and protect women, I mean, that could have came out of a tradcon's mouth. Like, that's how close these two groups of people are. And, like, it's kind of crazy when you start looking at it and realizing that I think they both kind of want the same thing, but they'll never admit that what you're really wanting is, like, special protected status for women, that, like, women get this elevated position in society above all else. And it's almost like putting women on a pedestal, basically. And that's saying it the polite way. But, and again, here is also this invocation of porn culture, which I don't really understand the porn culture thing. Like, you can watch porn. It doesn't necessarily influence your life. Like, I don't understand, like, is there anybody out there who's, like, so into porn that it colors their day-to-day existence? Like, I'm sure there are, but I don't think this is, like, some, like, dominant thing that a lot of people are doing to the point where it's, like, affecting society. Like, I don't understand this emphasis on quote-unquote porn culture. And then, of course, you have to throw in the male-dominant society, which is another way of saying the patriarchy, and basically saying that the only thing that men are remotely interested in is ensuring that they can have sex with whoever, whenever, wherever, whatever, which actually I'm going to hold off on making the point I was about to make. Because again, there's another part in this piece where I feel like the point can be better made. Moving on. And by the way, moving on here, this is the part where things start getting a bit creepy and fucked up, so buckle up. It isn't a plastic doll lying underneath them. It's every woman who's ever turned them down. Every woman they can't have. Every woman who has been more successful, more praised, and more desired than the man can ever dream of being. And now the man can do whatever he wants to that woman. Make no mistake, this isn't a doll he's doing, or maybe raping, or choking, or hitting. It's all those women he can't measure up to. Maybe one day it will be a real woman. Whoa, wait, what the fuck? I'm sorry. Did they just basically accuse all men of being rapists? Or rapist in waiting? And that they're basically just, like, waiting for their chance to spring out of the bushes and beat and rape women? What kind of attitude is that to have towards literally half the planet? Half the planet's men. Do you really view half the people on this planet as fucked up sexual predators? Like, this is some wild shit right here. Like, I don't even know what to say to that. I told y'all it was fucked up. I told you. And this idea that every man who has sex with a sex doll is somehow acting out these violent, rage-filled fantasies and picturing other women who have maybe said no to them, or is, I don't know, their boss's boss, or some shit like that. I'm like, what in the world? And for what it's worth, I mean, there's lots of reasons why a man would buy a sex doll. And even I doubled down on my mistake of reading this piece by also reading the comments. And there was one guy that wrote in, and he was a member of the armed services, and he was in active combat, and he didn't go into specifics, but apparently he was injured and disfigured in a way that makes him sexually unappealing to women. So he bought a sex doll in order to basically have, like, I mean, warm body isn't the correct term, obviously, but to have something approximating a woman in his life. And the first time I was ever introduced to the concept of a sex doll, and, like, it was a real doll, and I'm totally showing my age here, but back in the day when HBO had the real sex show, where they documented all kinds of, like, shit like this, there was one episode about men who bought real dolls, because it was real dolls were like kind of the first ones to hit the market and go big as far as like somewhat realistic silicone sex dolls. And I can still remember watching that episode, and there was one dude, and he had one, and he treated it like she was real. Like he dressed it up and like had her sit at the dinner table while he ate, and he talked to it, and like it was a real woman. And I remember being completely creeped out by that at the time. I was just like, what the fuck is wrong with this dude? But now looking back on it, it's like there are some people out there that are really that lonely and really that desperate for companionship. And it's sad when you think about it on that level. But I mean, obviously, not every guy that buys a sex doll, and for what it's worth, these are not cheap things to buy. Like, to buy a decent sex doll is a pretty hefty investment. I don't think they're doing it just to like destroy it and then throw it in the trash. Like, I mean, good ones are anywhere between like $5,000 to $10,000 and can go up from there. Like, it's not like you spent like $50 and got like a blow up thing. Like, these are investments. So yeah, there's just this weird idea that any man who's having sex with a sex doll is doing it because he wants to have violent, rapey sex with women is just, it's so bizarre and so kind of divorced from reality that it's like, why would you even think that? Like, who put that idea in your head? But moving back to the piece, because this is the paragraph that I've been alluding to where I feel like certain points can be made better after saying this paragraph. So, men do not have a right to sex. Feminists have worked for centuries to free women from the objectification that stems from oppression. It's a steep climb made even more difficult by the barriers thrown our way. Scantily dressed women and little girls dressed in bras and sheer stockings are used as sex-up advertisements for almost any product. Cars, beer, cigarettes, clothes, shoes, and lingerie. The more objectified the woman, the better the ad and the higher the revenues. Okay. This idea that men feel like they are entitled or have a right to sex. The only dudes I have ever fucking seen float that idea are incels. So unless you're trying to make the argument that every dude is an incel, this is a false argument. I don't know any normal, rational, well-adjusted man who feels like he's entitled to sex from any woman, anywhere, at any time. So again, it's this weird attitude that they have towards men. Like, what men are you hanging out with? Like, who are these dudes? Because I don't know them. Like, where are they? So I can know not to go there. But I mean, honestly, I don't think that they exist. Like, obviously, incels exist, and I've talked about that before. But is this honestly how they feel about men? That men are just these vile creatures that feel entitled to sex and will stop at nothing to get it? Like, if that is true, if that is genuinely deep down their heart of hearts how they feel, it explains so fucking much. Like, that is like a kind of like a puzzle piece that just kind of fell in place for me, because I always see these reports about women who feel like they can't say no to men sexually. Like, they're afraid that the men are going to do something to them, instead of just being like, okay, cool, like, you're not into this, that's fine, whatever. If this is how you genuinely feel, then I can understand making that argument. You're wrong, because your view of men is so freaking skewed that it's almost off the damn chart. But that was kind of like a light bulb moment for me. And also this idea that, here's those words, objectification and oppression. Like, if you are viewing everything through the oppressor-oppressed paradigm, then obviously if you are a woman and you need to maintain your victim status, then you have to be oppressed, which means you need an oppressor, which means if you are a heterosexual female, the man is going to be your oppressor. Like, there's no acknowledgement that sex can be a co-equal thing, that it's not one person oppressing the other or one person getting over on the other, that it can just be a thing where both of you can mutually enjoy it and find it mutually pleasurable, and that's it. Like, it's not taking anything from the other person. Like, to give doesn't mean that the other person has to have something taken from them. Like, it's this weird, and I'm still trying to figure out the best way to explain it, but it's like, I'm sure some of you can understand what it is I'm trying to say. Like, this idea that it's I think a lot of this kind of thinking belies a deeper issue that these women have with sex in general, that this is kind of like the symptoms and not the root cause. Like, I think the root cause is that these women really don't know how to handle their own sexuality, and so manifesting it in this way and making yourself a victim and making yourself oppressed means you never have to take responsibility for your own sexual decisions. Like, you never have to have a voice during sex. You never have to articulate what it is you want because, of course, you're being oppressed. So it doesn't matter what you want. And then it kind of becomes this self-fulfilling cycle. So it's still something I'm working on, but I think there's a there. I do. I really think that is the root problem that a lot of these feminists have, is that they're just squicked out by sex. Like, I'm still working on it. But before we leave out of this paragraph, because this is actually a very interesting point that I saw somebody make today, and that is this idea of sexing up advertisements. The Super Bowl was last night, and as horrifying a game and halftime show and the commercials and everything about that game was just so shitty, so awful. My God. But I was watching the news today, and they were making the point that a lot more women are watching the Super Bowl now than were in years past. And they said that last year's Super Bowl, it was almost like a 50-50 split. And that you're starting to see in the advertisements for the Super Bowl and in advertisements in general, in the milieu of sports, a more shifting kind of presentation of the advertising, knowing that there are more women watching it and that you're actually not seeing so much of these sexual ads of where it's, you know, sexy women drinking beer or drinking soda or driving cars or doing what the fuck ever. That there are more ads kind of geared towards at least being gender neutral, if not geared towards women. So I think this idea of overly sexy advertising is kind of dying its own slow death anyway, with or without the radical feminists. But it was just an interesting counterpoint that I was thinking about today while I was watching the news, and thinking that, you know, with women being more interested now in what used to be quote unquote man stuff, it is kind of shifting the way that advertisers respond to what was normally like a male dominated audience. And it's an interesting shift. But anyway, moving on. Pornography is freely available to all, including children, with a simple search on a phone. It's violent, dehumanizing, and falls within the spectrum of torture. Its victims are women and girls. Thanks to porn culture, the word consent has lost all meaning. In pornography, women say no while tears stream down their faces. Their pain and fear is real. The message received by men is, do it harder, do it longer, and make her suffer more. Children huddle in small groups on school playgrounds during recess or lunch, watching degrading porn on the screen of that one kid who is allowed to bring a phone to school. Okay. I have discussed here in this space before the idea of teenagers watching porn. I don't think children are watching porn on playgrounds, first of all, because children can't go freaking 15 seconds without being monitored by an adult on a playground right now. Like, that's a whole nother ball of wax, and I really need to get around to making that particular episode. But anyway, here's this idea that pornography is all this horrible, like, torture porn. Like, first of all, what porn are they watching? Like, I just, for science, I went on Pornhub the other day just to see, like, what was on the homepage. Like, what kind of, like, what's popular? What's surfacing? Like, what are they promoting? And it's all pretty much basic shit, for lack of a better word. Like, it's kind of disturbing the extreme lack of body hair on everybody involved, but that's a whole nother topic. But yeah, it's like this portrayal of porn, like it's all some kind of bizarre, almost snuff porn. Like, you'd have to go to some pretty damn dark corners of the internet to find the kind of porn that they're describing here, where it's really women being tortured. Like, I'm not gonna say it doesn't exist, but you ain't gonna find it on no mainstream porn site for many reasons. But this idea that, again, here we go with the porn culture again. Porn requires consent. Like, you're literally consenting to do a thing, and you're doing it for money. Like, okay, whatever, it's your job. Do your thing. But this idea that the women in porn aren't, like, there of their own accord and aren't willingly participating in whatever scene that they're participating in is just blatantly false. And this idea, like, where is this porn where these women are, like, crying? I don't, again, what are you watching? Where are you going? What, I don't know what to say to that. But again, it just speaks to this attitude that they have towards men that apparently you seem to think, and again, this goes back to that oppressor-oppressed paradigm that I was just talking about, that in order for men to enjoy sex, that they have to be, like, depriving you of pleasure. Like, it can't be a mutually pleasurable thing. Like, it has to be that they are receiving pleasure and you are not receiving pleasure. And this is, like, this whole section is, like, just reinforcing that idea that men feel that way. And I don't know, I don't feel like I've lived a particularly blessed life in this area, but I've never had sex with a guy who wasn't very interested in my pleasure. Like, I don't know these dudes. I don't know these dudes who get off on making a woman suffer during sex. I've known a lot of guys who feel the exact opposite way, but I don't know these dudes. So, anyway, moving back to the piece. While young children are being educated about consent in schools, they are simultaneously getting contradictory messages from pornography and learning that women are disposable objects. Porn culture teaches girls that their value comes from the attention men and boys give them. In order to receive that attention, they have to morph themselves into an object for male pleasure. Boys have learned from pornography that they have a right to use and abuse women and girls. Some boys and men have been so convinced of this that when they're told no by women, they become enraged and filled with hatred. Again, invoking incels to try to make your argument about all men is not a good look. Like, all men do not feel this way about women. But going back a little further, there's that idea of women being disposable objects, which, again, I don't know any men that feel that way. So what are you projecting onto these men? Like, where are you getting this idea that men feel that way about women? Because I don't know any men that feel that way about women. Like I said, outside of incels, which are a tiny, infamously small portion of men. Like, that's not even remotely representative of 1% of men, let alone 100% of men. So where are you getting these ideas? And again, this idea that you have to somehow morph yourself into an object, like, nobody's asking you to do that. No men are asking you to do that. If you're putting that on yourself, that's your business. But don't project onto other people your own weird sexual hang-ups. Like, that's not cool. That's not okay. But moving on, because we're kind of almost done. We still got some more to do here. Adolescent girls and young women are more objectified today than at any other time in history. The toys they play with, the clothes they wear, the movies and television programs they watch, and all the online and video games they play all present women and girls as disposable sex objects. Where? Where the fuck is this media? No, I'm sorry, that's a point blank lie. Like, there has never been another time in history where it has been more acceptable for girls to go play with boys' toys and boys to play with girls' toys, and for different gendered kids to enjoy things that are quote unquote against their gender. Like, this idea that gender is becoming super stratified amongst children is just blatantly false. Like, that doesn't even make any sense. Like, what? Where the fuck are you getting this info? It's not 1959. What are you talking about? Like, this, again, and I guess this goes back to wanting to make yourself a victim of something, but I mean, don't make shit up. I mean, oh my god. Anyway, sex doll brothels are a symptom of the larger problem of misogyny. The rights of men continue to supersede those of women. Until women's human rights are respected, women will continue to be no more than disposable objects. Again, what the fuck is it with the disposable objects? Nobody feels that way. Why? See, this is what I mean about this almost feeling pathological at this point. Like, why do you keep harping on a point that is objectively untrue? Like, who are you trying to convince? What are you projecting onto another person? Like, that's what kind of creeps me out about this. It's like you keep insisting on this one thing that is not true to the point where it's a little weird. And anybody with like half a sane rational mind is like side-eyeing the hell out of you right now. Like, what? Like, this is your weird hang-up. Like, this isn't everybody else's weird hang-up. It's yours. And as far as women's human rights, like, what the hell does this have to do with a guy wanting to fuck a sex doll? What does this have to do with anything? Like, I don't understand. But moving on, because we're not done, and it kind of gets a little worse. And what, after all, is more disposable than a silicone doll? When it is done being used by a man, it's cleaned up and moved on to another user. When it is broken down, torn, battered, and no longer useful, it is tossed out with the trash. Sounds like what life is like for many real women, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. Again, what the hell? Like, I don't even know what to say to some of this. Like, is this genuinely how you view yourselves? Like, is this genuinely how radfems view women and view themselves? As just these receptacles and sex objects to be used up and thrown away? I'm so baffled. I don't get it. But let's go ahead and finish up the piece. Tell me again how silicone sex dolls are harmless male fantasies. We shouldn't be surprised we are here in 2018. What is surprising and should cause outrage is how so many people allowed us to get here. Get where? The only people that got you here is you. Like, nobody else is on board with this. But anyway, that is the end of the piece. And I wanted to do this because, again, like I said, I am trying to work through some thoughts, and I thought I would kind of share with you guys how that sausage is getting made, and by reading pieces like this. And again, if you know of any non-wackadoo, batshit crazy feminist content that I can read somewhere on the interwebs, please let me know, because it's getting a little disheartening. But overall, like, this piece, like I said to start off with, it's not only is it just weird on its face, because I can't imagine getting this twerked over dudes going and having sex with sex dolls. Like, whatever, do your thing. You're not hurting anybody. I don't give a shit. It's this attitude towards men, and this thought process of what it is that men want from women sexually. And it's like, it's the most bad faith argument I think I've ever seen. Like, you're operating under the assumption that men cannot possibly want women in any way other than to just be violent and degrading and hurtful towards women. And it's like, that's not the reality of experience. And like I said earlier, if that is genuinely how they feel about men, that explains a whole lot. And it also makes me want to start pushing back on this idea that women that feel that way are feminists, because the dictionary definition of feminism is the theory of political, social, and economic equality of the sexes. If you feel this way about men, you clearly do not feel that they are equal to you. So what really are you advocating for? Like, stop using that word if you're not going to use it correctly. And that's kind of another thing that I'm trying to work through to make better, clearer, more coherent thoughts than what I have right now on that topic. And that is the idea of the word feminist and how far afield it has gotten from the original definition, and how maybe it would be worthwhile, perhaps, for those of us who do view the sexes as equal and do feel like politically, socially, and economically they should be viewed as equal, maybe need to start trying to take that word back from this 3rd/4th wave bullshit and maybe try to start yanking it back towards the original definition and the original idea behind feminism. So, like I said, more on that later, but for this episode, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. As always, if you did make it this far, thank you. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Take care, and until next time.